Hi, my name's Ariadne, and I was thrown out of my family home on Christmas night, with my grandfather in a wheelchair beside me, shivering under falling snow. My father called him a burden. My mother? She slapped me across the face and said we belonged in the trash. They slammed the mansion door behind us, like we were never family at all. But here's what they didn't know. The man they left out in the cold, he stood up, and with one sentence, he burned their world to the ground. What would you do if everything they stole from you was already yours? Before we begin, tell me, what time is it where you are? And who would stand with you if your world fell apart? Let us know in the comments. Now, let me tell you how silence became my loudest answer. Christmas Eve in my parents' house always felt like stepping onto a stage. Everything gleamed. The polished silverware, the fine china, the gold-rimmed wine glasses catching the glow of chandelier light. It was all there, lined up in perfect symmetry, like it had something to prove. I sat at the far end of the table, where I always sat. Not out of choice, out of design. My mother had a way of arranging things so that I was exactly where she wanted me, seen but not heard. Smile, Ariadne. You look so tense. Her voice was syrupy sweet, the kind you use when guests are around. I felt a dozen eyes flick toward me before quickly returning to their salads. I forced a slight curve into my lips and nodded. I hadn't said a word all evening. I'd only flown in from Charlotte that morning, barely had time to shake off the airport before being ushered into my childhood home. Same as it always was, impeccable, hollow, and cold in all the places that mattered. Grandpa Alaric sat next to me, bundled in layers, the same navy sweater he wore every Christmas, but it hung looser this year. His hands shook as he tried to lift his glass. Cassian, the man I still called Dad, exhaled loud enough to draw the room's attention. Maybe he shouldn't be here if he can't even hold a fork. No one laughed. They were too polite for that, but they didn't look surprised either. I glanced at Grandpa. His eyes stayed down, his fingers curling tighter around the stem of the glass. He built this house, brick by brick, story by story, and now they treated him like outdated furniture. I opened my mouth, closed it. What was the point? Cassian's voice cut again, sharper, meaner. You're a burden, old man. Get out. The words dropped like a plate shattering on tile. No one moved. The clink of a spoon fell silent halfway to a guest's mouth. I pushed back my chair before I even realized it. My hands were cold, but my voice wasn't. Don't talk to him like that. I heard the scrape of my mother's chair before I saw her hand. It cracked against my cheek, stinging with the heat of every Christmas I'd swallowed silence. You two pieces of trash deserve each other, she spat, all charm gone. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. Around us, the laughter resumed, light, hollow, desperate, as if nothing had happened. I turned to Grandpa. Let's go. Outside, snow blanketed the porch in a soft hush. My breath fogged in the air, but I barely felt the cold. Grandpa's wheelchair creaked down the ramp, my hand steadying it. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a bag, just my coat, a wallet, and the heat of shame burning under my skin. We reached the gate. I was about to ask if he wanted a cab or if we should find a motel when he stopped. His hands, moments ago trembling, now stilled. Then, slowly, deliberately, he stood. I froze. His back straightened. His voice, when it came, was the same one I remembered from childhood. Firm, grounded, impossible to ignore. The will is ready, he said. The mansion, the company, and $200 million belong to my grandchild. I blinked at him. He met my eyes, and in them, I saw none of the weakness they accused him of. I turned toward the house. Through the frost-laced window, I saw them. My mother's fork frozen mid-bite, my father's jaw slack. Their world had just cracked. I didn't smile for revenge. I smiled because, for once in my life, I felt free. They hadn't destroyed me. They'd released me. I pulled the collar of my coat higher and took Grandpa's hand as we walked into the night. It wasn't the warmth of money or victory that filled my chest. It was clarity, the kind that burns away everything false. I thought I'd lost everything that night, but I was wrong. I'd just been set free. The cold had numbed my fingers, but not my mind. As Grandpa and I stepped through the old side entrance of the mansion, I realized I hadn't set foot through this door since I was maybe 10. It was the servants' entry, narrow, stone-lined, quiet. The hinges creaked like they hadn't moved in decades. The snow still clung to our coats as we entered, tracking silence in behind us. Dawn hadn't fully broken, but pale gold light crept across the marble floors and cast long shadows along the hallway. Everything inside smelled faintly of wax, wood polish, and something older, like forgotten memories sealed too tight. Grandpa didn't speak at first. His steps were slow but steady now. No chair, no hesitation. I walked beside him, arms crossed tight over my chest, unsure if I was cold or just trying to hold myself together. My thoughts spun in circles, his standing, his voice, the will. He finally spoke, his voice softer than I expected. "You've seen what they've become. Now you'll see what they've forgotten." I followed as he led me through the heart of the house. It felt like a museum more than a home. Paintings lined the walls, portraits of Millers long dead, all scowling in that same heavy-browed judgment that used to terrify me as a child. We reached the main hall. The chandelier above, once dazzling, now looked dusted with time. Grandpa lit a single candle from a box he retrieved from a drawer beneath the staircase. Its flame flickered, making the shadows dance across the portraits. "This house was meant for legacy," he said, "not pride." I looked around. The silence here wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like it had teeth. We walked deeper into the house, past rooms no longer used, past the grand library with books I'd never been allowed to touch. My shoes echoed on the wooden floors, a soft thud-thud that somehow made everything feel louder. He paused in front of the study door. Without turning to face me, he said, "Years ago, when Cassian took over the company, I saw who he really was. I knew what he'd do with power." He opened the drawer of a low cabinet and pulled out a file, thick, yellowing with age. Inside were stock transfer documents, legally binding, dated more than a decade ago. My name was on every single one. "I put the shares in your name," he said. "Sealed it until your 30th birthday. You were the only one who came to see me when I fell. The only one who sat with me when they all had excuses." My breath caught. I remembered those visits, the ones they said were pointless, the ones where I brought soup and he never touched it, but always smiled when I showed up anyway. "You planned this?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, I just planned for the day truth would matter." That sentence stayed with me, hung in the room long after he moved away from the cabinet. We kept walking. He turned. Down a corridor I didn't recognize. Faded wallpaper, colder than the rest of the house. At the end was a door painted the same color as the wall, nearly invisible. He pulled a brass key from his coat pocket. The lock groaned open. Inside was dust, silence, a life hidden. Stacked ledgers, boxes labeled Miller Holdings 1995, old photo albums, some torn, some untouched. On one table lay receipts, real estate documents, and bank records with large transfers signed under my mother's maiden name. I stood frozen. These weren't just family mementos, they were records of theft. "He stole from his own father," I whispered. Grandpa didn't flinch. "Power doesn't change people," he said. "It just shows who they already were." Something in me shifted, not like a crack, more like a slow turning. A realization. This house, this family, Everything I thought I knew was built on silence. I turned to him. I should have said something years ago. He walked over, placed his hand on mine. His fingers, though thin and veined, were steady. "You were a child," he said. "They made you believe silence was love." I blinked hard. The weight of years pressed against my chest, not just their lies, but my own complicity in keeping quiet. We made our way back through the hall. I passed the dining room, the scene of the night before. The long table still set, though abandoned. And near the window, the chair Grandpa had sat in was now covered in frost from the cracked pane behind it. That same chair used to mean so much. Now it looked like it belonged in a mausoleum. I noticed something small beside the plate where I'd sat, an embroidered napkin. Except the name stitched on it wasn't mine. It was Andrea. My mother had never once spelled my name right, not even on Christmas. I picked it up and slipped it into my coat pocket. I didn't know why. Maybe to remember who I'd never been, or maybe just to never forget who I was now. The sun was rising. Orange light spilled into the hallway, hitting the portraits on the wall. Their painted eyes didn't look so powerful anymore. I took one last look at the house I used to call home. It hadn't changed, but I had. As the sun climbed higher over the mansion, I sat alone in the study. The room had once intimidated me. Its high ceilings, dark paneling, and heavy drapes absorbing all light like secrets clung to wood. But now it felt different. Now it felt like mine. I hadn't slept. After Grandpa showed me the hidden corridor, I stayed up sorting through boxes until my hands were black with dust and my back ached from crouching over ledgers. Memory clung to every page, every brittle folder. The kind of memory that didn't show up in photo albums. The kind that stained. By mid-morning, golden light slid across the oak floor and landed on a box I hadn't noticed before. One shoved to the corner, as if someone tried to forget it existed. Its label was simple. M. Holdings, 2014-2019. I pulled it closer. The cardboard creaked as I opened it. Inside were stacks of papers, some neat, others stuffed in like an afterthought. I reached for the top file. Contracts, investment transfers, wire receipts. My breath slowed as I scanned line after line. That's when I saw it. My name, my signature. But I didn't sign these. The first time it was on a wire transfer to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. Then on a property acquisition in Luxembourg. The dates lined up with the years I was studying abroad in London. Years I barely had time to sleep. Let alone authorize million-dollar moves for a company I hadn't even joined yet. He used my name. He forged my signature, not once, repeatedly. My father didn't just steal from his father, he stole from me to do it. I dropped the paper on the desk. My hands were shaking, not because of the money, I'd never cared about that, but because I understood now what he thought of me. I wasn't just a daughter he dismissed. I was a tool, a loophole, a useful name on a line. I stood up, pacing slowly. The walls felt like they were closing in. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then I found the second folder, tucked beneath a manila envelope labeled H. I opened it. Emails, dozens. All between my father and Mr. Hayes, the lawyer who'd handled the family's legal affairs for years. The man who'd smiled politely when I graduated college, sent flowers when I got my first job, called me kiddo like some warm uncle. They'd been planning this together. Contingency measures if the girl ever learns the truth, one email read. Another. As long as the shares remain sealed and she doesn't contest the trust structure, we're safe. The words blurred. I sat down hard in the chair. My ribs felt tight. I whispered to myself, so they planned for my silence. I didn't hear Grandpa enter until he spoke behind me. His voice was low, but steady. They always feared the day you'd stop keeping peace. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. Because everything I believed was unraveling. Not just about money or the company or even my father, but about what I'd allowed, what I'd accepted. I thought I was being respectful. What I was compliant. And for what? So they'd leave me alone in peace? So I wouldn't rock their perfect porcelain world? I turned toward the desk, tears drying stiff on my face. The study window showed bare trees swaying slightly in the winter breeze. The same view I used to stare at when I was little, when I sat in the corner and waited for dinner to be over so I could escape. Keeping the peace, I muttered, was never peace at all. I pulled the napkin from my coat pocket, the one with my name stitched wrong. Amara, not Ariadne. My mother never noticed, not once. I stared at it for a long time. Then I folded it slowly and tucked it back into my jacket, not because I was ashamed of it anymore, but because it reminded me of every time they got me wrong, every version of me they created that didn't fit. It would be a symbol now, not of who I was, but of who I refused to be again. I need to talk to Hayes, I said aloud, standing. Grandpa looked at me, calm, but with something new behind his eyes. Pride, maybe. I didn't want to confront my parents yet, not when I was still this raw. But Hayes, he wasn't family, and he owed me answers. I walked over to the landline. It sat in the corner of the study, the same rotary phone that had been there for decades. Funny, so much deception, and yet they'd never changed the phone. I dialed slowly, and as the line began to ring, something in me stiffened. I didn't know what I'd say yet, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to be silent anymore. I didn't hang up. I just listened to the dial tone stretch into silence, as if it were daring me to back down. Then I placed the receiver gently on the cradle, stood, and walked to the front hall without saying a word to Grandpa. He watched me go with eyes that understood more than he let on. The drive into Richmond was slow. Rain had started, steady and cold, turning the roads slick and the sidewalks glossy. I pulled into a parking space across the street from Hayes and Bloom, the law firm that had managed our family's estate for longer than I'd been alive. The wipers swept the windshield in rhythm with my thoughts, brushing away the beads of water, but not the nerves gathering in my chest. Christmas lights blinked weakly from the office windows above, distorted by the rain. There was something almost cruel about how cheerful they looked, like confetti at a funeral. Every time it rains in this city, secrets come loose. I grabbed my coat, locked the car, and crossed the street. Inside, the building lobby was all glass and gray marble, clinical, impersonal. A woman at the front desk looked up, recognized my name, and buzzed me through without asking why I was there. That alone told me too much. When I stepped into his office, Mr. Hayes was already standing, smiling like this was a reunion and not the next page in a very old betrayal. "Ariadne," he said, extending his hand as if nothing had changed. "I was expecting your call." I ignored the handshake and sat down. His office was warm, almost too warm, and smelled faintly of pine-scented air freshener, masking something stale underneath. The walls were lined with awards, all gleaming in polished frames. But none of them looked earned. He reached into a drawer, pulled out a folder, and slid it across the table toward me. "Updated inheritance documents," he said casually. "You'll want to review them." I opened the folder slowly. My name had been scratched out, replaced by my father's. I looked up, my voice thinner than I expected. "You changed it." He didn't blink. "Legally, I followed instructions. After all, you were declared mentally unfit to manage complex assets. It's all documented, signed by medical professionals, with family testimony." It hit like a slap I didn't see coming. They hadn't just stolen money. They'd stolen my competency, my credibility, my right to defend myself. I felt the blood drain from my face. I was never diagnosed with anything. No, he said calmly, but concern was raised. Enough concern for precautionary action. I stared at him. So they lied, and you made it legal. His lips twitched, just enough to show a crack in the mask. I'm not here to argue, Ariadne. I'm here to help resolve this smoothly. Smoothly, that word again. Like the rug under your feet, right before someone yanks it. I looked down at the folder in my lap, then back up at him. You expect me to sign something today? Just an acknowledgement, he said, that you've been informed of the adjustments. I didn't respond. Just closed the folder and placed it neatly on the table. Then he made a mistake. As a courtesy, Mr. Miller asked me to notify him once you arrived. My hands stiffened around my coat. You told him I'm here? Hayes smiled again, too fast, too loose. He's concerned about your well-being, that's all. I didn't look outside immediately, but I felt it, an itch between my shoulder blades. When I finally turned my head, there it was. A black car parked across the street. Engine off. Windows tinted. Same model my father drove for years. They're watching me. It wasn't just paranoia. It was planned, calculated. They didn't want to destroy me, not yet. They wanted to corner me, make me fold on my own. I exhaled slowly, stood, and tucked the folder under my arm. Thank you for your time, I said calmly. He blinked. So, you're not signing? Not today. His smile twitched again, this time with something less certain behind it. Ariadne, don't make this adversarial. It doesn't have to be. I walked to the door. It already is. You just don't know which side I'm on yet. Outside, the rain hadn't let up. It poured in thin sheets over the pavement, muffling everything, horns, footsteps, even thoughts. I didn't run. I didn't glance back. I just walked to my car like the woman they still believed I was. Composed, docile, naive. Inside the car, I didn't start the engine right away. Instead, I reached into my purse and pulled out the napkin. The same embroidered one from Christmas Eve. The one with my name spelled wrong, Amara. My mother's perfect handwriting, stitched in gold thread, had once felt like a slap. A reminder that she never saw me clearly enough to spell me right. I took out a pen. Slowly, I crossed out the R. Then I wrote in small, careful letters, Ariadne. My name, my real name, not a placeholder, not a mistake. I folded it with intention and slipped it back into my bag, not as a scar, but as a signature. I used to think survival meant keeping quiet, I whispered. Now I see it means being quiet until it matters. Then I started the car and didn't look back. But I knew, the moment I did, the war had already begun. By the time I turned off the highway and onto the winding back road leading home, night was beginning to lean into the horizon. The rain had eased into mist, and the trees that framed the Miller estate looked like ghosts under the fog. I entered through the side gate, the one the landscapers never bothered to trim, pushing past damp branches that left streaks across my coat. The gravel crunched under my boots, but everything else was still, too still. As I stepped through the back door of the mansion, I was hit by the familiar scent of citrus polish and cold marble. A house that never felt like home, only a monument to the people pretending to live inside it. The television murmured from the living room, soft enough to ignore if I tried, but something in the tone caught my attention. I paused in the hallway, just long enough to glance toward the screen, and then I froze. My face, my actual face, filled the frame. The news anchor spoke over it in polished cadence. New reports suggest Ariadne Miller, sole granddaughter of the late industrialist Arthur Miller, is currently undergoing psychological evaluation after a private family dispute. A photo of me from college, smiling, flashed behind the anchor's head, like some kind of mugshot for the well-groomed. I heard the words, erratic behavior, mental instability, not currently in control of her inheritance. My hands started to shake. They didn't just want to strip me of power, they wanted to erase me completely and convince the world I'd done it myself. I didn't cry, I didn't even gasp. I just turned and walked, steady, down the long hallway and out through the side door that led to the greenhouse. It had been my hiding place once, back when I was 16 and needed somewhere my mother's voice couldn't reach. The door creaked the same way it always had. Inside, the glass was fogged, streaked with mildew and memory. Most of the plants were brown or brittle, leaves curled like fists. A few orchids hung on, pale and stubborn. I dropped to my knees in the center of the floor and just let it all go. The anger, the fear, the weight of every silence I had swallowed for decades. I pressed my forehead to my hands and wept. Not because I was weak, but because for the first time I was done pretending I wasn't. Even the truth needs air to live. And they'd stolen mine. I don't know how long I stayed like that, curled up between pots of dying roses and forgotten ivy. But at some point, I heard the slow, dragging sound of footsteps behind me. I wiped my face and turned. Grandpa stood in the doorway, one hand gripping the frame like it was the only thing keeping him upright. His lips were pale, and his breath shallow. "I didn't want you to see me like this," he said softly. I was beside him in seconds, helping him to a bench near the window. "What's going on?" I asked. "Why didn't you say anything?" He gave me a small smile, the kind that carries too much truth to be comforting. "The heart doesn't last forever, Ariadne, especially when it's been broken this many times." "No." My voice was sharper than I meant it to be. "We're just getting started. You don't get to leave me with this mess." "That's exactly why I waited for you." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. I needed someone who wouldn't just fight. I needed someone who knew why the fight mattered. I took the envelope and opened it carefully. Inside was a key, old and brass, labeled in faint pen, R23. "What is this?" He shook his head. "Not yet, but when it's time, you'll know. That key is either your escape or their reckoning." He leaned back, eyes fluttering closed. I sat beside him in silence, the envelope clutched in my lap. The greenhouse smelled like wet dirt and mold and memory. I looked around at the tangled vines, the broken pots, the stubborn bits of green that refused to die. They weren't pretty, but they were alive, and that counted for something. Survival isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. It's about refusing to go quietly. Across the room, something caught my eye. An old wooden chair, identical to the one from Christmas Eve. The one at the head of the dining table. The one my grandfather sat in when they tried to break him. I walked over and brushed the dust off with my sleeve. Then I sat. Not to rest, to remember, to decide. "They took everything that made me quiet," I whispered. "So I'll use the silence they gave me to end them." In my bag, the napkins still sat folded, now with my true name inked over the false one. I pulled out the key again, turned it over in my hand, and stared at the label, R23. I looked at the key in my hand and knew the next door I opened would either save me or destroy them all. The key sat warm in my palm, even in the chill of early morning. I drove without the radio on, no voice but my own thoughts, whispering louder than I cared to admit. The number, R23, was etched on the tag like a scar I hadn't noticed before. I didn't need directions. I knew the road. It curved along the riverbank just outside Richmond, past the farms and the woods that once made up our summer drives. The fog was still clinging to the treetops when I pulled up to the small brick structure, nearly swallowed by overgrowth. Ivy twisted around the rusted gutters, and the gate creaked like it hadn't been opened in years. Every secret they buried had an address, and I was standing in front of it. I slid the key into the lock. It turned easier than expected. The door gave a tired groan as it opened, revealing a dust-caked office with yellowing blinds and paper stacked like bones along the walls. The light switch clicked, but nothing happened. I moved toward a desk where a single computer monitor glowed softly, still running. I recognized it. Grandpa had one just like it in his study. The same model, the same quiet hum. I sat down and typed in his old password, his wedding anniversary. The screen flickered, then loaded a dashboard full of folders, labeled with years and codes I didn't recognize at first. But one folder stood out, AM Trust Holdings, my initials. I clicked. The documents detailed properties, investment accounts, even a shell company I'd never heard of, each one registered under my name, authorized by Grandpa over a decade ago. The first account was opened the year I turned 21, but more recent entries showed access logs dated just a few months ago, and they weren't mine. Scrolling deeper, I found authorization forms, digitally signed, by me. Except I'd never touched them. I stared at the screen, heart thudding as the name beneath each signature loaded. Cassian Miller, my father. He's been stealing from my future since the day I was born. I kept digging, blood cold, jaw locked. A second folder blinked at me. Internal Memo Archive. I clicked. Inside were dozens of files, emails, scanned letters, audio files. I played the first one. Hayes's voice filtered through. Cassian, if anyone else finds out, we'll push for a non-disclosure clause. Threaten legal action. Most won't risk it. Another file. A recording. Female laughter in the background, unmistakable. My mother's. She won't fight back, she said. She never has. I sat still, barely breathing. Every dinner, every birthday card, every smile they painted on. It wasn't just greed, it was a plan. They hadn't stolen to survive. They'd stolen to control. A sound outside made me jump. Through the dirty window, I spotted a man in a dark coat, standing still across the street, too still. He wasn't on a walk, he wasn't lost. He was watching the building. My stomach flipped. I yanked the flash drive from the terminal, grabbed the key, and stuffed everything into my coat. My hands were shaking as I shut down the computer and crossed the room. Just before I stepped out, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. You shouldn't have gone there. I stared at the message. My thumb hovered, then backed away. I didn't reply. Instead, I texted Grandpa. It's worse than we thought. I pushed through the front door, head down, and made it back to my car. The man across the street was gone, but the unease stayed. As I pulled out, I kept my foot steady on the gas. Every block away from that place felt like an inch closer to something I couldn't name. The skyline of Richmond came into view, jagged and familiar. It should have felt like safety. It didn't. I used to think the truth would break me. Now I see it's the only thing keeping me upright. I wasn't going to run to a news outlet. Not yet. Not until I had it all. I needed proof of who had buried the whole thing. I needed names, dates, orders. I needed the one person who told them to lie. At a red light, I looked up and saw the flickering neon sign of a diner on the corner. Amara's Cafe. I almost laughed. Fate, apparently, has a sarcastic sense of humor. I pulled over, walked inside, and ordered coffee. When the waitress brought my receipt, I turned it over and wrote my name on the back, for no one but myself, Ariadne Miller. For once, spelled right. I smiled, not wide, not bright, but real. The kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are after a lifetime of being told you aren't. I drove the rest of the way in silence, the flash drive in my coat pocket like a pulse. When I turned onto the driveway, the mansion loomed ahead, just as it always had. But something felt off before I even parked. The front door was wide open. I stepped out of the car, the cold biting into my skin. "Grandpa," I called out. No answer. I ran up the steps. The house was still, no lights, no footsteps, no voice. He was gone. When I got home, the front door was open, and Grandpa was gone. The house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes the air feel wrong, like the walls themselves are holding their breath. The front door swung gently on its hinges as I stepped inside, cold air curling in behind me. My boots left wet prints across the marble, but I didn't stop to take them off. Grandpa, I called. Nothing. The echo came back hollow. I walked through the foyer, the lights still off, though someone must have been here recently. The faint smell of coffee still lingered. My hand brushed the light switch, and the lamp on the dining table flickered on. That's when I saw it. A single note, folded. My name written across the front in his familiar handwriting, Ariadne. My breath caught. I moved closer, half afraid to touch it. The paper was creased, smudged, like someone had folded it too many times before finally leaving it behind. I opened it slowly. Just one line. Don't come looking for me. Signed, Grandpa. No explanation, no goodbye. Just that. He wouldn't write that, I whispered to the empty room. Not to me. The panic came fast and hot, like my pulse was trying to outrun itself. I tore through the house, his room, the kitchen, even the den where he liked to read. Nothing. No coat missing, no bag gone, just absence. Then I noticed something stranger, the blinking light on the security monitor in the hallway. I pressed the button, no feed. Every camera offline, every recording wiped. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking. Before I could even dial, a new message appeared. Mom, your grandfather is safe. He's where he belongs, at Restvale Care Center. Do not visit. I stared at the words until they blurred. Restvale. Of course. A facility owned by one of our subsidiaries. A place for private recovery. The kind of place where inconvenient people disappeared. My throat went dry. They didn't just move him, I whispered. They locked him away. My heart raced, but the fear started to melt into something sharper. Anger. Cold, clean anger. I turned toward the study. The door was cracked open. Inside, papers were scattered on the floor, drawers half open like someone had been looking for something, or hiding it. I stepped carefully around the mess until a folder caught my eye on the edge of the desk. Patient transfer, private. My gut told me what it was before I even opened it. Inside were printed medical documents dated today, transfer authorizations, emergency care orders, all signed by my father. But as my eyes traced the lines, something didn't add up. The physician's signature, Dr. Robert Wainwright. He'd been dead for 3 years. I dropped into the chair, my hands gripping the pages. They forged it, I said aloud, almost laughing. They actually forged it. I took photo after photo, page after page. Each one was a nail in the coffin they'd built for themselves. For once, the evidence wasn't whispers or family gossip. It was tangible, real. But then the weight of it hit me. I slid down to the marble floor, clutching the folder against my chest. The anger, the shock, the grief, all of it came crashing in at once. He protected me all my life, I murmured, and I wasn't there when he needed me most. Tears came, but not the kind that burn, the kind that clear the fog, because beneath the pain was something else, clarity. If they thought locking him away would end this, they'd forgotten who raised me. I stood slowly, my breath steadying, wiped my face with the back of my sleeve. Then I turned on my laptop. I connected the camera, uploaded every image I'd taken, every file, every scrap of truth, and saved it all to a private cloud account. Then I made a second copy, encrypted, and stored it under a name they'd never think to search. They wanted silence, I said quietly, staring at the screen. I'll give them silence, the kind that ends careers. The clock on the wall read 11:48 p.m. I scrolled through my contacts and stopped on one name I hadn't seen in years, Nora Blake, investigative journalist. We'd worked together once, back when I still believed the truth could stand on its own. The phone rang twice before a tired voice answered. Nora Blake speaking. It's Ariadne Miller. There was a pause. Well, that's a name I haven't heard in a while. This isn't a story, I said. It's an inheritance war. Silence. Then, I'm listening. For the first time in days, I felt a small flicker of control return. After I hung up, I went back to the dining room to gather my things. The lamp was still burning, casting long shadows across the table. That's when I noticed the chair, the same one Grandpa had sat in at Christmas dinner, still there, still facing the window. I ran my hand across the backrest, dust catching under my fingers. You're not gone, I whispered, just waiting. The room felt less empty when I said it. I tucked the folder under my arm, slipped on my coat, and looked back once more. The note lay on the table, its single sentence staring up at me. I folded it and slipped it into my pocket. Because if they thought that message was a warning, they were wrong. It was a challenge. I grabbed my coat and the folder. Because tonight, silence was going to make a sound. I drove through the storm with the folder on the passenger seat. My fingers clenched so tight around the wheel they ached. Rain drummed hard against the windshield, each drop tapping like a countdown. The wipers thrashed side to side, struggling to keep up with the downpour. I didn't care. All my life, I tried to earn their love, I murmured to myself as lightning cracked above. Tonight, I'd settle for their fear. The road narrowed as I turned off the main highway, winding past skeletal trees and the cracked pavement leading to Restvale. Fog swirled low over the ground like it was trying to hide the building from sight. But there it stood, gray, squat, and sterile, an institution dressed up like a sanctuary. 2 security guards stepped out as I pulled up to the front gate. You're not cleared, one started, but I cut him off, holding out the court file I'd patched together with just enough truth to feel legal. I have authority, I said flatly. Do you want to call someone, or open the gate? They hesitated. One looked to the other, then back at the paper. My stare didn't flinch. The gate creaked open. Inside, the lobby smelled of antiseptic and faint lavender, manufactured calm. The receptionist looked up, startled. I didn't wait. My eyes locked on the hallway that led to the private rooms. But I didn't have to go far. Cassian and Helena were already waiting. My father's jaw was tight, his lips curled like he was chewing acid. My mother's expression flickered between surprise and disgust. You have no right to be here, he snapped, stepping toward me. You're right, I said calmly, pulling my phone from my coat pocket. I tapped the screen, casting the image of the forged documents onto the digital display behind the front desk. But these say you do, with a doctor who's been dead since 2021. Gasps scattered through the lobby. A nurse paused mid-stride. Another staff member stopped behind the counter. Someone pulled out their phone and began recording. Helena's voice hissed through clenched teeth. How dare you bring this circus? I turned to her, voice low but cutting. I dare because you taught me that silence only feeds the abuser. Cassian took a step forward. This isn't your business. No? I tilted my head. Locking up your father and stealing from his name isn't my business? He opened his mouth, but another voice cut through the rising tension. Enough! The word came from down the hall, soft but unmistakable. We turned. There stood Grandpa, pale, unsteady, his arm looped through a nurse's, but his eyes sharp. Alaric, my mother whispered, half in disbelief. He didn't look at her. He looked at Cassian. You stole from me, from her, and from the name that built you. Dad, Don't! The word came like stone. I trusted you to lead, not to bury the truth under legal paper." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was electric. He reached into the pocket of his robe and pulled out a sealed envelope. His hand trembled, but his voice did not as he gave it to me. "Deliver this to Hayes. He'll know." Then louder, to the room. "As of now, everything under my name, my estate, my shares, the family trust, belongs to Ariadne." The receptionist gasped. Someone outside the glass doors lifted a phone, snapping photos. Helena slumped into a chair, her hands trembling. Cassian took one last step toward me, face twisted. "Don't," I warned, and for the first time he didn't. "You always said I was too fragile to lead," I said quietly. "Turns out I'm the only one who can stand." Security moved to flank my father. Helena didn't resist. She just stared at me like she didn't recognize the daughter she'd tried to erase. I didn't flinch, not anymore. As they were let out, a nurse walked over and pressed something into my hand. "He asked me to give you this." I unfolded it, the napkin from Christmas. Only now it was clean, carefully pressed, and this time my name was written the way it always should have been. Ariadne. I pressed it to my chest. The tears came, but they stayed tucked beneath my lashes. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Later, as I stepped out into the cool night, flashes from the press hit me. They must have caught wind of the documents, or maybe someone inside had tipped them off. A reporter called out, "Ms. Miller, what happens now?" I didn't stop walking. I just smiled faintly. "Build something honest." The rain greeted me like an old friend. No longer a threat, but a baptism. I didn't need thunder to announce what I'd done, but as I turned away, the thunder rolled behind me. Not as a warning, but as applause. But as I turned away, the thunder rolled behind me. Not as a warning, but as applause. A week passed. Not fast, not slow, just steady, like something inside me had finally caught up. The rain had moved on. That morning, sunlight poured in through the tall windows of the Miller mansion, streaking across the marble floors, the way it used to when I was a child, chasing it barefoot from room to room. It didn't feel like the same house anymore. Maybe it wasn't. I stood alone in the dining room. No shouting now, no whispers behind closed doors. Just light and silence. My fingers grazed the back of Grandpa's old chair, the one he used every Christmas. It didn't creak like it used to. It simply waited. "I thought winning meant getting everything back," I said to the room, though no one was there to hear. "But the truth is, I only wanted peace." The air smelled faintly of lemon oil and wood polish. Quiet maintenance had returned. No more lawyers walking through the halls like they owned the place. No more press vans outside the gate. I didn't turn on the news that day, but I didn't need to. It was everywhere. Cassian and Helena Miller, under federal investigation. Fraud, forgery, elder abuse allegations surface. Even Hayes, the man who once called me kiddo, with a smirk like I'd never grow up, had confessed. A quiet press release confirmed he was cooperating. I imagine his price for redemption came cheaper than my family name ever did. The company was frozen, its assets under review. Shareholders panicked, reporters swarmed, and I made tea. Because justice, when it comes, doesn't arrive with fireworks. It settles in. It sips from the same cup as grief. Justice doesn't fix what love broke. It only stops the breaking. 2 days later, I went to see Grandpa. The hospital was quiet, the halls lined with tired nurses and soft humming from TVs in patient rooms. He looked smaller in the bed, frailer, but his eyes, still sharp, still mischievous, lit up the second he saw me. "Told you the silence would work," he whispered, squeezing my hand. I let out a soft laugh through my tears. "You're infuriating, and you're unstoppable." He motioned to the nightstand. A thin envelope sat there, marked with my name in his handwriting. I opened it slowly. Inside, his new will. Clean, legal. No shadows. He'd named me executor of the entire estate, but it wasn't just about money. He'd restructured the family foundation, redirecting its funds to create homes for abandoned elders. The ones like me, he said, but forgotten by everyone. He smiled faintly. Turn what hurt you into shelter for others. My chest ached in the best way. Not broken, just full. That night, I returned to the greenhouse. The air inside was cool and damp. Rain had left its scent in the wood. I brought the napkin with me, clean now, folded carefully. I laid it gently on the wooden chair. Beside it, Grandpa's letter. I didn't need to fix my name anymore. It was already mine. The glass panels overhead glowed softly with moonlight. The greenhouse didn't look broken anymore, just lived in, breathing, like me. A few days passed. Then came the press conference. Nothing flashy, no podiums, just a small circle of reporters and a few microphones. I stepped forward, holding nothing but a single note card in my hand, though I didn't glance at it once. I was taught to be quiet when wronged, I said, voice steady. I learned instead that silence is powerful when it speaks for those who can't. No applause, just a quiet, respectful nod from the room. That was enough. Later that afternoon, I slipped away before anyone could ask more questions. I needed one last visit. The greenhouse welcomed me back like an old friend. Sunlight streamed through the east windows, landing right on the wooden chair. And for a moment, I swore someone was sitting in it, smiling. Some inheritances are made of money, I said softly. Others are made of courage. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. The light stayed in. I walked away from the mansion without looking back, because for the first time, I didn't need to.